Okay. Well, I just wanted the group to meet Mike Shirley and to introduce you guys to Frontier Technologies, Inc. I've known Mike for, I don't know, Mike, it probably hasn't been 10 years, but a while anyway.
Closer to that than you think.
Yeah, I hate to think about it, but Mike has over 30 years experience with both business and government. And he joined Frontier Technologies. You were at AECom, or was it URS at the time?
Both.
Both.
G was bought by URS. URS was bought by AECom for about 10 years.
And moved over, and Frontier Technologies is a small business. It's an employee-owned business, and was actually voted as one of the best places to work in Dayton, Ohio in 2019. And their CEO has participated in lots of testimony around SBIR and STTR, including as recently as September of 19. He testified on a hearing titled SBA Programs Spurring Innovation. So they're all about supporting small business, very heavily involved in helping with the SBIR, STTR process. And most importantly, they're focused on phase 3. And I think it's really important that we start recognizing, at least from the small business perspective, phase 1 and phase 2 is nice, but everybody really, really needs the orders or phase 3. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike, and he can fill us in on Frontier Technologies.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. So please stop me on any slide. Don't be bashful. And my purpose is to educate the crowd a little bit more on phase 3s. There's a lot of people that talk about phase 1s and 2 of the Small Business Innovation Research Program. And you'll see we have a history with those, but where people tend to get Frontier Technology involved is in the phase 3. And we'll talk about why that's so, and hopefully it'll encourage others to use this authority to solve a lot of different problems. I am just outside Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but we are in 26 different states, and we're over 400 employees now. We are still small business by some FTE count, head count, NAICS, but not for some of the revenues. We've been very blessed to have basically about doubled every couple of years, and I've been with Frontier about 5 years. And it's gone very well. You may wonder, well, why has Frontier Technology been successful in it? And we're going to show you a little bit of that, but more so this is to get your gears thinking about other companies, not just Frontier. That part of what we do is a very broad scope of work, a very broad scope of mainly services work. And for those that have a lot of exposure to the Small Business Innovation Research Program, I would say on the order of about 90% of the SBIR phase 1s and 2s are widget-based or some kind of hardware technology based, making a new, better lens for the Predator aircraft. Well, that's a bit hard to turn into a phase 3. You can, maybe, go to General Atomics and say, I've got a better lens, and can you incorporate this on your aircraft? Or go to the program offices and do that. That's not the path that we were on because we did SBIRs for a couple decades. It was mainly in the life cycle cost analysis, program management, data fusion arena. So that's what afforded us the ability to do a very broad scope of work. And so that's a key to having a good fit into the SBIR phase 3 world that's not hardware based. And as Lori said, I'll go through quickly the 3 phases. Phase 1 is an idea. It is competitively awarded. You could have more than one award, anywhere between 50 and 150K, depending on the service and those kind of things. And then a subset of those phase 1s get sponsorship to go to phase 2. And that's where it tends to be a a competition and also a prototype. You're supposed to produce something for now bigger dollars, $750K to 1.5 million. You can add to that. You can add non-SBIR funds to that. So both of these efforts are competitive. When we move into the sole source SBIR phase 3 arena, there's a lot of things that are opposite of the ones and twos. And that's where a lot of people, contract managers, industry partners, they may know a lot about ones and twos, but they haven't heard as much about phase 3s. And so we spend a lot of our time educating a lot of folks on the Small Business Administration's directive on what the SBIR program is, and specifically the phase 3s. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And by definition, a phase 3 is any work that derives from, extends, or completes a SBIR phase 1 or 2 effort. And so if you fit in that category, you can move those phase 1s and 2s into phase 3. The other thing, and you'll see in some of the slides, some of our material is focused on the program management team of the government, and some of it's on the contracting officer, because again, somebody may have run across this during their training as a contracting officer, but it might have been 10 years ago. The rules might have changed. Back in 12 and 13, they got rid of a lot of barriers of contracting. And so what they might have learned initially as a contracting officer might have changed. One of the things that's very nice is you can do the sole source based on the intellectual property of the phase 1 and 2, yet the contracting team will get competition credit. Usually when you say sole source, you think small business set aside, you think 8A, A, and C. In our case, in the SBIR program, you don't have to have any of those types of things. And then the other big change is SBIR funds are used for phase 1s and 2s, but on phase 3s, that's the only color of money that you cannot use. So it's anything but SBIR, because now you're supposed to stand on your own. You're supposed to go out and find your own customers and use other people's money. So there's guides. If anybody wants, I'm happy to send them to you. I'm a retired Air Force guy, had a right path. And so it pains me to say what I'm about ready to say, but the Navy guide is the best. They just updated it in the spring of this year. I'm very happy to report that my good friends in the Air Force program copied their previous version, and that's mainly what the Air Force guide is. Because it's really good material, even though it's about 50 pages in some cases, there's about 3 pages of frequently asked questions. Because a lot of what I'm about ready to tell you, you may think just doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound legal, doesn't sound ethical. I could assure you that it all is, but more importantly, that in the Navy guide, the Air Force guide, it spells it out. With the frequently asked questions, you can tell that came from very inquisitive contracting officers and program managers that thought this is too good to be true. So you don't have to listen to a contractor. I'm a contractor. You can listen to the government in their own guide. I will say the Army guide is not up to snuff in terms of the capabilities. Whenever we send a SBIR guide out, I always accompany either the Navy or the Air Forces, because the Army, they just need to copy off the Navy and be done with it, because it's not nearly as thorough. So let me just stop there, though, for a second. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions anybody has. Okay. All right. So the next slide, we've won over 160 phase 1s and 2s. They are a lot of decision analysis, cost, schedule, performance kind of things. Currently, we have 28 SBIR phase 3s. And by the end of September, that should go up to about 32. A friend of mine has said, SBIR phase 3s are like unicorns. You hear people talk about them, but you never see them. And Mike, I think Frontier is breeding unicorns. And in some cases, that may be true in the sense that we work very well with contracting organizations inside the government. We work very well with GSA. When one of the customers need a contracting organization that they don't have one, maybe they're unified command and they don't have the ability to do it. And then we've learned over time how to do phase threes as IDIQs, as direct awards, as basic ordering agreements. And each has, their own preference. But really our difference is our technologies can support the whole life cycle of a program or system, as opposed to just some small little widget or some small time within the program. And so I kind of broke this out by, here are our 28 phase threes. And you can tell it's pretty balanced of basic ordering agreements, IDIQs, and direct awards. Basic ordering agreements, we've been able to bring the lessons learned from, we learned basic ordering agreement phase threes from the Navy, because that's what NavAir, great contracting officer in charge of that at Lakehurst. His name is Tom Hill, just outstanding. And I was asking Tom when I first was getting to know him, I said, Tom, why do you do basic ordering agreements instead of IDIQs? He's like, Mike, why in the world would I put an IDIQ in place? When I say the term IDIQ, everybody thinks it's going to take a year or two to put in place. A basic ordering agreement by the FAR 16.703 is not a contract. It doesn't have ceiling. So the quickest basic ordering agreement we've done is about 2.5 weeks. And so it shows what topics that the phase ones and twos are associated with, and then what the government wants to do with those. And it's been nice because to accelerate that, we can draft documents. Alpha contracting is allowed. We own the intellectual property for our ones and twos. So this was a huge shift, me coming from the competitive world, where that would be illegal or unethical to do, but in the phase three world, it's encouraged. So with program managers, with contracting officers, we can show them what other folks have done. We can even, what I call SBIRize a performance work statement, because they don't know our tools. And so we can do that for them, and that gets them a pretty good 90% solution. So the basic ordering agreements we like a lot because since they have no ceiling, it's really unlimited ceiling. And you just have to review them once a year to see if the law or the FAR or something has changed, and then it can keep going. So we end up doing 5-year task orders off of BOAs all the time, and the customers don't have to go through the bureaucracy of a $50 million or $100 million IDIQ. And you'll see that we do all the different services, not much outside of DoD yet, but we're working on that. So
Mike, can I add something?
Absolutely.
Just for the SBDC counselors, one of the most challenging things, there's a lot of challenges for small business, but one of the challenging things and one of the frustrating things, and I actually went through this as a small business, I had something the government wanted and was very much encouraged to bring that to the government. And one of the first things when I finally got to that point they ask is, well, what's your contracting mechanism, Lori? And that is a really hard thing to A, understand, B, for a small business to know where to go to get that and just to navigate. So I think that's one of the things that everybody needs to understand, that phase 3 is about getting that contract. And if you don't have contracting knowledge and understand all these contracting mechanisms, that's a huge barrier. And so that's what FTI and Mike and the team are so good at, is helping them navigate that.
And Lori, if I can add, what's nice about what we do is we love having industry partners. So don't think that just because we have the intellectual property to generate a phase 3 that we don't have teammates. That can't be further from the truth. What we do to do what Lori just said is that we can bring on any teammates, and it's on this slide too. It can be large businesses, small businesses, FFRDCs, universities. Some cases that are maybe very difficult. In fact, one of the phase 3s that we did, we had an OEM, a very large OEM as a subcontractor, and we had an FFRDC. The only way that could have been more difficult is if we would have had a university. And so we were able to get that done in about 45 days. And again, as industry partners have great things that they want to bring, the intellectual property of a SBIR does not interfere with the data rights, either of the government or our teaming partners, because our intellectual property only deals with the software that we're using. And think more like Microsoft Office, rather than stuff that's going to be on a weapon system or in a system. Ours tends to be things that support it, like Microsoft Office, like things. So then if somebody's bringing some other widget to help them, do things better, it is very effective for us to team up together. And then we provide that contracting solution. Also, you have to fold in some of the technology of the SBIR to make sure it's legal and ethical. But there's also no numbers. There's no percentage that has to be. So we try to, make the contracting officer and the program manager comfortable in that the ratio of FTI labor to our subs labor makes sense, but there actually is no written restrictions of that. And as we walk through this slide, I'm not going to read it to you, but what most people don't know is that, again, the SBIR Phase 3 can be anything: product, services, production, R&D, studies, analysis. Many people actually thought it had to be a widget or a piece of software, and that's not true. And so you can provide adjacent services, not just the ones directly correlated to the intellectual property. So as you read through this and you see any teammates, you see any funds except for the SBIR funds and any federal agencies, so not just DOD, nor not just the 11 agencies that have SBIR programs. There are 11 agencies that have SBIR programs, but anybody can do a Phase 3. That's not true of Phase 1s and 2s. So Phase 1s and 2s, it's only the 11 agencies that kind of tax their R&D and then put those SBIR dollars toward, increasing the technology of the industrial base. But even if you don't do that as an agency, you can do SBIR Phase 3 sole source contracting. And again, as a taxpayer, if FAA wanted to use some of our capabilities that were developed in a Phase 1 or 2, we wouldn't want them to have to start at Phase 1 and go through all those things when the Army has already paid for it and developed. As a taxpayer, I want them to go from Phase 2 to Phase 3. And we do that. And we educate folks on how they can do that, even if their agency doesn't even have a SBIR program. And again, these are things that are in the SBA directive and also are in the guide that I mentioned before. Any security level, so we have things that are TS, SCI, SAP, SAR, and any contracting option, whether it's cost plus, FFP, time and materials. So again, as kind of Lori was saying, as people are looking for solutions, they get very surprised at how flexible this is. And it's really whatever the contracting and program management team want to do. And so the last three on the slide are geared much more toward contracting officers. The first part of the table is kind of more for program managers. But then when we get down into competition credit, again, if that's going to help the contracting team and the metrics for the organization, that's great. Now, the last area has nothing to do with SBIR Phase 3. It has much more to do with FTI, in that we are not a small business by revenue, but are by size standards. And when we ask the contracting officer to not make our SBIR Phase 3 a small business set aside, they think we're crazy. And they're like, wait a minute, I've never had a small business not want to be a small business set aside. Well, back to the example where I had an OEM and an FFRDC, it was about $1 million. And the optimum team, because of our knowledge, their capabilities, was really about a third, a third, and a third. Had it been a small business set aside, as everyone knows, for like-sized companies, we would have had to do 51%. And we would have got through it like a lot of companies do. But what happens is then our teammates are so happy that they're not constrained to the 49%. Let's give the very best possible solution to the government. It's not about everybody wearing an FTI polo. And so that is a big deal. And so when the contracting officers kind of understand that you're kind of tying your own hands, if you make it a small business set aside, we're going to give you the best solution possible. But if what you really want small business credit, choose NAICS 5 541715, and we're under 1,000 people, so you don't even have to use one of the exceptions, you're going to get 100% small business credit. So they're going to get what they want for their metrics, but then they're not going to be put in a situation where if they need multiple other companies to bring the best solution, that we're going to be in a bind. Let me again stop here and see if that generated any questions. Okay. So I'm not going to go into our tools today. That's not the purpose. But a lot of people, are like, why haven't I heard of many phase threes, if any? And I'll say, we're one of the nation's leaders in this because of the great work people did well before me to generate these tools. And you can see that these technologies span the whole life of a program or system, from data analytics to program management to logistics and prognostic health management. And again, we've got PhDs that can spend an hour with somebody else's PhD and talk algorithms and things like that. But what's important is that these are what are generated from our phase 1s and 2s, and then they can be used for our phase 3s. And then the other concept that we like to point out in the SBIR program is this isn't just for a phase of a program or a system. That some of our tools need data. The bottom set need data to analyze, but the ones at the top can be used even before there's data, so in their R&D phase, and then they can be used throughout the whole life cycle of the system. That is part of why you haven't seen as many. I'll tell you though, with AFWorks, with Dr. Roper, with the Honorable Hondo Gertz, with the Navy. Hondo was an Air Force guy here at Wright Pat, went on to do good things at SOCOM, and now he's a bigwig in the Navy. Well, he and Dr. Roper and others have pointed out to people that the SBIR Phase 3 solution is legal and ethical. It's been around for decades. Please go use it where it makes sense. And when we sit down with contracting officers, what's neat about it is they're happy to find out that it's FAR-based. We've done one SBIR Phase 3 on an OTA, and we do work on OTA, so we're familiar with them. But a lot of times the contracting team is more comfortable with the FAR-based solution, because many times the OTA is ran by a consortium and they may or may not be involved, whereas they can, with the FAR-based solution, do it in their own contracting shop. So, how does this happen? Well, we talk to people with problems and money, and again, it's from industry partners through the various program offices and procurement offices, and there are people that need solutions. They may need a technical solution, they may need a contract solution, they may need some advising. Maybe their normal CETA or ANS support does a great job of delivering 80% of the solution. But when they're trying to get the 30-year SMEs, they're trying to get the biggest brains in electronic warfare in the country, they may not have the rate structure or the ability to go get them or to do studies. One of the things we found is on some of the established contracts, they may have a study CLIN, but it will take longer to put that study in place than it would to do the study. So you kind of go, wow, it's probably going to be OBE by the time this all gets done. So having a relief valve to some of their normal contracting solutions. So many times our phase 3s are not put in place to replace their existing contract solutions. But as Lori said, when somebody says, hey, how can we get to you, to one of our teaming partners, and then we talk with them and go, well, here's some ways we think we can add value, and then we go together to co-market with the government team, then it can be an effective solution for everybody. And again, some common phase 3 solution ideas. I mentioned the term relief valve because that happens all the time. This time of year, we get calls where somebody's got $4 million today and we need to find a home for it. And not just find a home, but we have to make sure it's legal and ethical, and that they're using some SBIR technologies. Not all of our 28 phase 3s are active, but some of our phase 3s, for example, one of those listed has 26 task orders on it. So we have a lot of different customers with a very broad scope of work that, we're going to try to find that solution. And these are some various areas where people have, got a typo. Sorry, that was this morning. These were some of the folks that where we help put these things in place in order to solve some very hard problems for them. And again, had a turnkey contracting solution. So one piece of it is what we do with our teammates, but the other piece is that contract solution, because without it, as everybody on the call knows, nothing goes forward. So I wanted to give you an example of a basic ordering agreement, and it says sample at the top, but I'll just tell you that this is with the Air Force, and these are the objectives. Again, any color of money, any type of work to be done, all the ceiling limits are at the delivery order level, and any security level. So when you just take a glance at the objectives, you look at that and go, holy smokes, you can build it, you can test it, you can field it, you can analyze it, you can do technology upgrades. Some say, wow, you could drive a truck through it. I point out that you could actually build the truck, test the truck, and then drive it through it, because it's everything from the original concept forward. So my point in showing you this is just how broad phase 3 solutions can be. They don't, in our case, they don't mention systems, they don't mention FTE counts, because again, it's sole source. It's the concept is, what can we do to help you over the next 5 years? And you may have no clue what's going to happen in year 2 and 3. We'll help you with whatever problem that you have, with delivery order 1 now, and then you can create whatever delivery orders you need as the challenges come forward.
Can I just add something to that? And again, so the SBDC counselors, there's a lot of very knowledgeable SBDC counselors about how the contracting world works, but some may not be as experienced. When you have a very broad open contract, that's a good thing. And in a lot of instances, the basic SBIR phase 1s and 2s are very, very specific. So it makes it really hard for a small business's solution to fit in that very specific, detailed ask. And so what Mike is saying is, when you have this broad scope of work, that's like an excellent thing. Because chances are, if somebody has a product or a solution or whatever it is, it's going to fit within this scope of work. So it's not like trying to find that perfect contract. A very broad-based contract is a perfect contract, right? So I just wanted to explain that a little bit.
No, I appreciate that, Lori.
Terms.
And especially in the last quarter of the year.
Yeah.
In the last
I'm laughing because I got a text this morning about that.
And people are going, hey, I just got funded, delivered to me. I didn't plan on it. All my unfunded things are now funded, but I need a contract vehicle. And again, an SES up at Hanscom, I was explaining this to him, and he's like, Mike, what you're telling me is, as long as it has anything to do with cost, schedule, and performance, I can use this. And I said, yes, sir. That's absolutely true. And he said, well, that's great. Everything I do deals with cost, schedule, and performance. So as people are trying to find a solution, and then we recommend, we may solve their problem in September, but then we recommend that they put their own relief valve, because everybody has their war stories about how they had to give money back, or how they had to pay an organization 30% to put something on contract at the end of the year. And it's like, why don't you own your own relief valve solution? If you never need it, you haven't really invested much. But if your history is that you don't have things to catch the oddball things, or your organization is changing. We happen to have one of the efforts, one of our phase 3s was with the Space and Missile Systems Command. And we're doing really good work with them. And in the middle of this comes Space Force. And now their world's turned upside down. And now we have 3 SBIR Phase 3 efforts with them, because the whole contracting world, it was very difficult as they redid the organizations and they're redoing who reports to whom, having a relief valve contract vehicle, because they have the normal OASIS related vehicles for their normal support and their science and engineering support, but they didn't have stuff for in the seams, and this really helped them for in the seams. So I just wanted to give you a few examples as we walk through, the Navy and the Marine Corps. We've done a whole bunch of work to help them. The Navy and the Air Force are our biggest customers, and we're getting actually a brand new Phase 3 with the Marines as we speak. One of the interesting things, and the Marines made me think of this, as you're dealing with small businesses, one of the neat things, and this is right in the SBA directive, it's also in the Navy and the Air Force guide. It's not in the Army guide because the Army guide's terrible. But you can do unsolicited proposals. So as you run into a program management team and a contracting team that maybe has never dealt with it before, we'll ask them, would it help you if we just gave you an unsolicited proposal where it's all spelled out? And then you edit it, you tweak it, we start negotiating across the table together on day 2. And that's been very effective. So again, as small businesses are out there trying to break into this market, they're running into a lot of people that just don't have the experience on Phase 3s. And I'll tell you, a lot of times, the junior contracting folks have been outstanding because they don't have any Phase 1 or 2 kind of biases. They're just like, hey, this is just another program. And they'll read the guide, they'll read the directive, and they will become the expert and actually become kind of the hero in their contracting organization. That they're getting things done in 6 weeks instead of 6 to 12 months. And people go, wait a minute, how'd that, person, didn't they just get their warrant, like a year ago? How'd they do that? And it's been wonderful to see the energy that they bring. And so I mentioned, some of these things already with SMC out in LA. And we do work with hardware. We got an OEM to put a system on an AC-130. And we tested it to see if their system was going to improve the first shot accuracy on the big gun on the AC-130. So it doesn't all have to be, studies and things like that. Hardware can absolutely be involved in SBIR Phase 3. So those services and materials can be bought.
Mike, can I add one other thing?
Sure.
There's a lot of talk about PIAs and OTAs, and they're wonderful. Trust me. I mean, I had 6 PIAs, right? And they are awesome. But the challenge for some of these commands is they do not have a chief scientist, which is one of the stipulations for PIAs, is you have to be an R&D organization. And the other bottleneck is in contracting. So they have to have a special warranted officer to do an OTA or a PIA, and there just aren't enough of those contracting officers going around. So the fact that Mike and FTI can do a contract that is a FAR-based contract, just to point that out, there's so many folks that want to do a PIA, want to do an OTA, but they don't have a warranted officer, they don't have a research scientist, they don't fit those stipulations. And that's where FTI can really, really help. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that the counselors might not understand that there's a lack of those contracting officers, and there's a lot of commands that don't have that R&D arm to qualify for those other types of contracts.
And sometimes when you find contracting officers with some experience, it's in the Phase 1s and 2s. And, it's an educational process because, for example, initially a lot of people think, well, this is just for R&D efforts. And then as, they look at the guides and other things, we go, no, really, it's not just R&D. That's only one aspect of it. So it's whatever color money you have, but there is so much experience in the SBIR world in Air Force Research Lab or Army Research Lab. They're used to the phase 1s and 2s. Phase 3s end up being in other organizations, so they may not have as much experience. So that's another common thing, is people thinking, oh, this is just for science projects or R&D. And then when you show them that, no, this is anything that can help them operationally. We did a project where we were helping the Air Force and the Pentagon in the A1, in the personnel world. They had 110 different personnel systems that touched data, from an airman to a general to a government service employee. 110. They weren't all connected. They weren't all talking the same thing. So they wanted some life cycle cost analysis of what if they got rid of some of the systems, what if they combined it, where should they put their data centers? It was operational, look, with a analysis of an alternative and life cycle cost aspect to it. So it, again, had nothing at all to do with R&D, and that's true even of the color money that they were spending. So these are some other areas that we've been working in. The Army is going to get us a new phase 3 by 1 October. We've been working with PO Missiles and Space for a while. And one of the ones we did last year was the Defense Health Agency. And they chose to do a basic ordering agreement. And in fact, before they even did the basic ordering agreement, they just did a UCA, or a letter contract. Again, got it done in about 2 weeks. And then the BOA came later. So there's all kind of different things when you have this sole source ability that they can do, that it just blows people's mind compared to the normal. As I mentioned before, somebody says IDIQ, they think 1 to 2 years. And instead, being able to do a letter contract or UCA, or get a basic ordering agreement up in a few weeks, in parallel working the first delivery order, are just not the normal units. Usually, no one's talking about days to weeks. They're talking about months to years. And so it's nice that we can change the dialogue in terms of the time.
Alan, are there a couple questions for Mike? He's got to unmute.
Okay. Yep. So one of the questions was, if this is the first time they were hearing this, are you saying release out contract?
I'm sorry, relief valve.
Relief valve.
Organizations may have their normal contract vehicles that have been in place for a long time, but then when the organization gets some hard to do things, this tends to be a relief valve. So not intended to replace their normal support, but to augment that. So relief valve is what we talk about.
Now, when you say as a follow-up then, when you say the organization, are you talking about the individual company? Or are you talking about the agency, the division at a Navy unit, or which way are you talking?
I'm talking about the government organization.
Okay.
So they'll have, whatever contracts at their disposal, and then this will, be in addition to that, so they can get things done. And so, because sometimes a contracting officer may not want to put a new contract in place because it's additional workload, until they see how flexible it can be. And almost everybody has some very hard to-dos that got put on their plate in the contracting world. And then they see this as a way to help on their very hard to-dos.
Okay. The other question is, what is a PIA that I think Lori brought up a while ago?
Do you want me to answer that, Mike, or you got it?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Okay. It's a partnership intermediary agreement, a form of an OTA. And that's how AFWORK started, SOCOM. A lot of the different innovation hubs are on PIAs, partnership intermediary agreements. It's kind of a form of an OTA, if you will.
And for those that don't know, and the OTA?
Other transaction authority.
And what does that mean?
They are non-FAR based contracts. And so typically, well, I guess an OTA does not have to be managed by a 501c3. They actually can be managed by a private company. And there are consortium based OTAs. and non-consortium based. And so the consortium based, the small business pays a fee to be a part of that OTA, and the non-consortium based, that doesn't exist. So PIAs have to be managed by a 501c3. It has to be done by an organization, a government organization that has a chief scientist and has a function of R&D. So they cannot have a PIA if they don't have those things. And in some instances, a lot of those innovation hubs have been starting to be operated out of what they call CSOs, which is another new term, commercial services offering, and that is a GSA contract. And that contract also does not have to be managed by a 501c3. It's a contract used for services for innovation and tech, basically.
Great question.
I think that's it for now.
So that brings us to this slide, because a lot of times when you hear something fairly new, or just maybe not have the exposure, you think that the contracting element of it is very complex. And it was great that Lori was talking about OTAs and PIAs and others, because it can be. Those don't have to be, but there are certain constraints that you have to work within. So what we've done is we've kind of done a step-by-step to go, this is what we do. We make it fairly simple. We talk to the government program team who has the challenge. We work with them to define a PWS, fold in the technologies of the SBIRs, things that are involved. And then we work with them to say, okay, how do you want to do this? Sometimes their local contracting is overwhelmed, or that they're shut down for the year. And sometimes contracting shops shut down as early as June. So it may be the best thing for that organization to go to GSA. So we'll talk about that. Then we work with the program team, whatever contracting organization that they've decided on, and we refine that PWS. So that the requirements are there. Again, with 28, we've got some pretty good drafts that are ready to go for people. And really step 5 is throughout the whole process. We may even go into step 1 with a teammate. And we do that with small businesses all the time, to where, what are the organizations that we're going to need in order to deliver a really great solution. And then we either initiate a new phase 3 with the contracting shop, or we use one that's currently in place. And at this time of the year, that's what we're doing a lot of, is working with our teammates in the government to go, hey, there's this other organization, they're doing some similar things to you. It's for the warfighter. And again, I think you guys will get along. You've got plenty of ceiling and scope. Would you mind if they put $1 million on, and then they'll get off of it, within 6 months, that they'll have their own contract vehicle in place. And then the funds get either MIPR'd or they're already in place in the organization, and you go off and do work. So we present this slide so people see there's not a lot of smoke and mirrors and voodoo going on here. It's just the normal coordination process. The elements is a program manager that's willing to go forward, requirements, money, and then a contracting officer. Those are the elements that are needed in order to make this happen. But the good news is it could be any program manager, it could be any contracting officer, it could be any color of money.
Mike, can I ask a quick question? Because I just think this would be really helpful. So in the case of SBDCs and SBDC counselors, how does the situation of them, they have a great small business with a great technology. How would that process go, starting with a great technology and a great small business? Could they reach out to FTI? And is this process very similar when you do you do it that way, where you start with the technology and then go out and look for the contract?
So we've done it both ways. And really, from your perspective, you have some small businesses with great technologies. And I encourage them, if there's a fit to go down the SBIR 1 and 2 path, but don't only go down the SBIR 1 and 2 path, because it may take a long time, and realize that the SBIR 1 and 2 path, that may be what they need to get going, but it doesn't pay a whole lot in terms of scaling. And eventually there's a cliff. So that, sponsoring agent that might be in a research lab is going to go away when you're trying to scale it and make it a long-term solution. So I encourage them to look for SBIR technologies or things that can turn into SBIR technologies. But if they want to accelerate it, we work with small companies all the time where, like you said earlier, Lori, that, hey, the customer really wants the technology that you're working with. How do we get to you? And so maybe it's a much more accelerated path than what the normal SBIR 1 and 2 would be. And they can maintain their data rights and their IP, because that's the other question. They're sometimes very large companies, OEMs, will buy up small companies for their technologies. And that, of course, is still part of business today. That's not the FTI model. We're more than happy to, what I was saying before, do co-marketing, sit down with the customer and this small company and go in together. What happens a lot of times, and let's say we go in with the 10-person company and they have the greatest laminate for some product in terms of hardness. Well, okay, we can sit down and talk to SOCOM or somebody else about that. But then as they learn about the various other SBIR technologies that can help make decisions, then that customer ends up going, well, yes, I want to harden my systems, but I also want to hear about how you can help me make better decisions. So it's kind of a win-win for both companies without stepping on each other. So we're more than happy to help. Feel free to send them my way. And also, if they choose the SBIR path, it tends to be a longer road than most think. And so you're talking to one of the, companies been in it for over 20 years. But again, a lot of that was some trial and error and lining up the right customer with some of our technologies. And then only when they got rid of the barriers of contracting did we turn that into phase 3s. So that's where, sadly, a lot of the small businesses don't go the SBIR route because, 50 to 150K doesn't really pay the bills for a lot of things. So if, you're happy to talk to them, and I do that at shows and other things quite often where, we'll talk to companies that go, okay, it looks like you guys cracked the code. How do you do that? And then we'll go, well, you can do it this way kind of on your own. But if you want to be a subcontractor to us, we can do that. And then there's a lot of companies that have been subcontractors to us. They've learned how to do this, and now they have their own phase 3s. So we realize that happens, and we're more than happy to give back. Almost none of them are really competitors of ours. They've got some different technologies that we don't have. So happy to support that.
So they can call you directly, Mike. That's the path for these SBDC counselors. If they have clients that have good technologies, you're open to them contacting you at FTI.
I am. So yeah, you give me a call, send me an email. What we tend not to do is, hey, we're going to go market your technologies for you. We're happy to talk to them and find out where there's some niches. And then, I've got a staff of 10 business development folks and consultants. And then I will introduce them to the people that are probably closest to their technology and their niche, whether it's Navy, Army, Air Force, Marine, whatever. And hey, if there's something there, great. But they've got to get out there and market their stuff. We're more than happy to co-market and work through that.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've got. I don't know if Mindy saw my question. I didn't know if you could turn Jack's microphone on. He's loaded with several questions, and he's probably tracking like me. I'm thinking some of this too. So I'll ask them for him until Mindy, if she can turn it on. If she can, I'll just talk for him.
Jack's on.
Okay, cool. Jack, go ahead with your questions if you're there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was just curious, how unique is FTI? I mean, do you have competitors in the market?
So that's a great question. We just did some analysis on who are our competitors. And it depends on the market, meaning in the Navy, we probably have a few SBIR Phase 3 companies that might have 2 or 3 Phase 3s. The Air Force, because of pitch days and other things, they brought a lot of attention to the SBIR program, which is great for everybody. So there are probably a few more. The Army, no big surprise, doesn't do a lot of SBIR Phase 3s. We're helping change that. When we're looking for peer competitors, we haven't really found somebody to be a peer. And I try to really not say that in any arrogance at all, because we just happen to be blessed with a whole bunch of Phase 1s and 2s that were very marketable into Phase 3s. Not everybody over the last 2 decades did that. But now some companies are, and they're getting, 1, 2, and 3 Phase 3s. There's one company that learned from us, and they got a $300 million Phase 3, and it's like good for them. And again, I know their owner. We've talked about it, and again, they've learned, and they're doing things different than us. Most Phase 3s are small, 1, 2, 3 million kind of deals. We have one that's 4 million. We have some that are unlimited. We have some that are 112 million, and others. So it tends to be kind of a walk, crawl, run in that. And we're finding a lot more are walking or crawling and walking. And, I think they're going to do great. But it's not simple to turn that into, dozens of Phase 3s. One thing that happens when you win your first one, you're so happy that you won. And let's say it's a decent size. Let's say it's 20 million. You've got a great contract vehicle. You've got a great solution. And so you're filling it up. So you're not even, in some ways, even caring about number 2 and number 3 yet, because you've spent so much energy making this happen, and you're so happy about it, that a $20 million Phase 3 for, let's say, a 20-person company is enormous, and it's going to carry them into new areas. So I think there's that kind of almost a stair-step approach that happens a bit. We're very happy with our market position, but we see more and more companies doing Phase 3s, and we're actually glad for that. As Lori said in the beginning, my boss, Ron Schroeder, testifies before Congress to say, hey, this is a great program. It helps the country. It helps small businesses. So we are a huge supporter, not just of FTI, but of the whole program. So some other questions.
Yeah. And you kind of alluded to it, but I just want to ask, do you have any kind of size or scale limitations as far as the size of client that we would bring to you?
Let me answer that in 2 ways, because I should have said this before. A lot of people will say, well, wait a minute, to do Phase 1s and 2s, you have to be 500 people or less. And FTI, what happens when you're above the 500, which we will be hopefully within a year if things go well? It doesn't matter how big we are, we can still do Phase 3s. We could be 5,000 people. So to answer your question in terms of how big the customer effort, we've worked, $50 and $100 million efforts. So we're very comfortable. We've had very large businesses. Many of the names that are subcontractors to us. They're very happy that FTI doesn't have to do 51% like they would with an 8A or A and C. So, if a very large business could do 60% and we do 40, they're way beyond their 49%, which tends to kind of cut down. So, no, we haven't ran across a size limitation yet. I don't know that somebody would put $1 billion Phase 3 in place. That's probably too big. Technically, it's not by the FAR and by the SBA guidance. There is no limit to the size. I just haven't seen people do that. 400 million is the biggest one that I know of. There's some others below us that have some smaller ones than that. And then, like I said, on the basic ordering agreement, there's no limit to the size.
Can I interject Oops, sorry. Can I interject one thing real quick? I actually met Mike when I was a teeny weeny little company. So I'm thinking the SBDC counselors are thinking about their smaller
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's where
customers
I was going.
instead of big companies. And I will tell you that little Lori Moncrief as a small business met Mike, and we have kept in touch all these years, and he does take my call, believe it or not, still. Um, so just to assure you, when Mike says, yeah, go ahead, have him give me a call, I said that just to get it out there because I know Mike is there and available because he was there and available for me.
But I appreciate that. So from the other end of the spectrum, yeah, happy to talk to them and give them, some advice. And if there's a way we can team together, great. If it's going to launch them into their own cyber world, that's great too. So there really isn't a small, hey, this is too small for us to talk to. I learned that a long time ago. I was met a 10-person company for pancakes in Honolulu, and I was with a multi-billion-dollar company. But somebody said, "Hey, you got to talk to this company. They're amazing." And that little 10-person company led us to win a contract together for $56 million, and broke that AECOM at the time, URS, into a brand new market. So I call it the power of one. I don't think there is something too small. I expect people to pull their own weight, but more than happy to brainstorm with them.
Good. And then what's your revenue model? How do you make money on the deal?
So that's a great question. We make revenue on direct labor. So we don't really make revenue on shrink wrapping software, even though many of our technologies are a piece of software. So it goes hand in hand with the legal and ethical aspects of a cyber phase 3. And that is, we want to do direct labor also. We're not a pass-through. So we get involved when it's a business case for us to do that. And that might be a 50-50 split, for example. So there was a 10-person company out of Wright Pat that we agreed that we're going to go into a new market, and we would split everything 50-50. So every deal is a little bit different, but our revenue model is based on FTI direct labor, not on selling software.
Okay. And then I think you might have talked about this, but do you help these business owners find target customers within the government, or is that on them to find them and then you sort of co-market with them?
Yeah, so we tend not to find them for them. We may have some ideas on where they may want to hunt. Hopefully, these small businesses have some contacts kind of within the government or where they think their technology or their services, can serve. And there may be a connection to something that we're doing. We're doing a ton in the cyber world right now. We're doing a ton in agile software development right now. So there may be a good overlap there. If they don't know where to go, then that's something they probably need to find out a bit on their own, because we're not going to carry them. I'll just be very honest with you. I'm not going to, hey, well, let's make sure we connect you with all these different folks. It's your technology, it's your company, but we're happy to co-market. That's one of my favorite terms. Is I'm more than happy to sit down with a government customer, them, us together, and talk about the strengths of that turnkey solution around both of them, whether that's somebody we know or somebody they know. But companies that come and meet with us shouldn't expect for us to carry their load. That won't happen.
Okay. And then one last one. Best way to get started is just to have them contact you directly.
Sure. Give me a call, send me an email. If you would, have them reference, kind of this call. As you might imagine, I get kind of unsolicited emails to do lots of different things. And, some of those you can tell are kind of spamish. And I would hate for somebody to do that and me not know it, that it was somebody you recommended. So if one of you want to make the introduction and say, hey, this is, from SBDC as a follow-on, then I'll make sure that I respond and kind of they don't get it in the junk email file. So however you want to do that, happy to talk with them. And sometimes that's all they need a bit is some encouragement and some direction. But then, hey, if there's things they're doing that are pretty amazing, happy to see where, we may co-market together.
Okay, that's mine.
If I could add one thing for SBDC counselors when you're talking to these small businesses, I don't think it's as much as what, I guess the way to phrase it to me when talking to these small businesses is if FTI can help you get a or $50 million contract, and there are services that FTI does as a part of that contract, and say it's a 50-50 split, that small business getting a $25 million contract is probably, they would be thrilled to get a $25 million contract. I think it's only 15% of the phase 1s and 2s move to a phase 3 on average, they say. So if there's a resource like FTI that significantly increases the chance of them even getting a phase 3, it's worth it. Because so many of them just stay at phase 1 and 2 and never get to that 3. So I think that's how, in counseling small businesses that keep not getting phase 3s, it's worth at least seeing if Frontier can help them get to a phase 3, no matter what that split is and how it works.
And even if they aren't in the SBIR program at all, I mean, the majority of people I talk to aren't doing any phase 1s and 2s. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't limit it just to folks that are trying to get to phase 3s. I mean, it's great. What you said, Lori, was correct. But the majority of the people I talk to in the small business world don't even know the program exists. And so they're just out there trying to win and mix it up. And many times they have customers, like you're saying, that want to get to them. And boy, can we help them with that. I mean, that's an easy one for us to sit down and do a business case together to make it happen. But we can help on both sides, the SBIR side and kind of accelerating them on contract. Because one of the big things is, they can go out there and do GovWin or, whatever the case may be and throw their, proposal in on an IDIQ or direct award or whatever. But we all know that cycle is 1 year to 2 years a lot of times, from RFI to draft RFP to RFP to protest to award, all those kind of things. Where we get pretty excited is in 2 months to 4 months, if there's a requirement, if there's money, if there is that customer behind it, these get done in weeks and months. And what we find is there's nobody like small businesses that are especially small that are trying to meet payroll, trying to grow, and 200,000, 400,000 in 4 months is worth so much more than that 18 months from now, where they may not even be able to retain some of the key talent that got them where they are. Then if they can grow off that, great. So maybe they end up spawning off their own contract or whatever. But what we found is that it's a little bit of a safe haven. For now, they've got, let's say they're with us on a 5-year task order. They've got a nice place where they can grow and retain people, because that's the other thing. When, as we're fighting for talent out there in the contractor world, if somebody says, hey, can you come work for me to do agile software development, and I've got a 5-year task order, or somebody else says, can you come do agile software development, and I've got a 8-month task order, all things else being equal, of course they're going to choose the longer term. So we find these smaller companies can grow and get their own roots and get their own infrastructure and figure out what they want to be. Because there's a critical mass that I'm sure as counselors you guys are very aware of, that once you get over about 15 or 20 people, one person can't do that. I like to warn small businesses, if you're going to do it on your own, one person, boy, you're kind of lining up for a heart attack and some serious stress. If you have 2 or 3 people that are going to help you, build this rope and pull yourselves up, Once you get to, 20, 30 people, you're going to try to manage all that and all the contracting, legal, HR, everything. Prepare yourself for that, and meaning, make sure you've got some other quality people working on your team so you don't, kill yourself growing your business.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Those were very good questions, Jack. Alan, any other questions?
Oh, yeah. I want to follow up with what Jack's asking. Do you understand what our Encountering Innovation Conference is?
No, I'd be happy to be educated on that.
So, because I'm wondering if there's a matchup here that I'm either getting or I'm completely missing. Our Encountering Innovation started 3 years ago. This is our 4th year now. And this year it's more of it is a virtual conference. We are matching primarily Department of Defense Tech Scouts with innovations through the work of Bill Carey, who's online with us. He's our science advisor. He's won multiple SBIR Phase 1 and 2 STTR. And so he's got a good background working with different agencies and SBIR, and he's our scientist. So he's the one who has to look at the TRL along with our business advisor, tech coaches, and the match. Through that, then, we prepare the clients, and they present in a 20-minute pitch to the DoD Tech Scouts and others. So it may be DOE or someone else, but primarily DoD is the lead. Once they're finished, then the Tech Scouts talk with each other and decide based on the innovation whether or not they would like to socialize or refer the innovator to someone else, to a program manager, etc. And sometimes we get great reviews and the client thinks they're going to go someplace or do something, and then they're struggling to, either the customer wants to get them but is tied up. Is that where FTI becomes a possibility, or based on what you're saying, this is not someone that has to go get a Phase 1, Phase 2 SBIR and then they're stuck. This is someone who's being referred and has found who they believe their customer is, and then there's a challenge to get them connected or move forward.
Yeah, I think that we can help in that role. Because like what you're describing, have nothing to do with Phase 1 and 2s, but have a great capability they're trying to deliver to a target government audience. And yes, I have those meetings every week.
Okay, so that's normal for you. That's not like, yeah, we could try that.
No, it's pretty normal.
Okay, good. All right. I just want to make sure we have several tech coaches involved in the Encountering Innovation and clients. We've got clients that I think, after what you said, I'm thinking of some that I hadn't thought of before based on what you said that we would like to go talk to. So I think part of what we probably should do is, like we do with our Encountering Innovation and our DoD Tech Scouts, is try to figure out a way, at least for Kansas, how we talk to you in a way that we don't overwhelm you, but also help you understand if it's actually a quality or qualified lead to you.
Yeah, and I don't want to put too much of a burden on you. You're not going to offend me if somebody comes and, let's just say they're not way up on that quality readiness scale. Let's call it that. That's life.
Yeah.
And so I don't want you to overthink it too much. Spending 15 minutes, 30 minutes with somebody, you could usually find out if they have a plan and have some capabilities worth talking through. And again, you're helping FTI, so let me make that really clear. Half of our business development is talking directly with the government. Half of our business development is talking to industry partners. And so we're not just doing this because we're nice people. We're doing it because it's good business. And so too many people think that, oh, you just got to kind of race to the government and throw elbows around the government. Even way back with a very large company, I learned, no, go have those pancakes with a 10-person small company. and you never know where it's going to go. And so that, I think, as you have these various companies, if you think we can add value, I hope we don't disappoint you. And if it's not a match, it's no big deal. But yeah, happy to talk to the folks that you're coaching.
Great.
And Mike, I'm going to be working with Kansas. That's what I'm doing, and we're going to put together a process. And certainly my plan is to have FTI as part of that process as one of the options for the small businesses. So
yeah, we appreciate that.
So we've got one more question just popped up. Does Frontier serve as a potential partner for small businesses to assist with their research and development efforts? How are IP matters addressed in these engagements? And do you have examples of successful ventures you can share?
Yes. And so we make it clear to our partners, our teammates, that our IP, so one of the only FAR clauses that is required in a SBIR Phase 3 is for the SBIR data rights. But those SBIR data rights are for the topics and the technologies related to kind of how we got there. Any other IP, any other data rights, we want the company or the government, depending on whoever owns it, to keep it. And for them to do very well. And we've done this not just with very small companies, but with humongous companies. And they care a whole lot about their IP and their data rights. So those two worlds really don't intermingle that much. And we're happy to put those in teaming agreements and others. When I mentioned the 110 different systems as an example, we worked with some very large industry partners that had proprietary solutions. And again, they were able to be on our contract, execute their proprietary solutions, and have absolutely no effect on their IP because it had nothing to do with our IP for our SBIR topics. I will tell you, that's one thing that scares some people away from SBIR Phase 3s, is they are so concerned about the data rights and the IP because that's the centerpiece of the 1s and 2s. And so for a 1 and 2, I could not say what I just said. If it's for the 1 or 2, then it's going to be, much more kind of protective because that's why you're doing it. But for the Phase 3, you're doing all kind of different services and materials work. But when people learn that, hey, SBIR means, IP, then if they carry that over into the Phase 3, that's not a good analogy.
Gotcha. Any other questions? Well, I would like to echo what Laurie said. We are planning on working with her and getting that moving forward. And I think learning what you're doing and how we can collaborate and work together is exciting.
Well, Laurie, thank you so much for having me. As you can tell, I love talking about this. And coming out of the competitive world, this life is so much better. Stress levels down, and any other companies I can welcome into that world, it's all the better. I've got to get a nice backdrop like you guys have. It's very, very relaxing.
I'll teach you, Mike. We'll talk. I'll teach you.
I don't know if I'm going to give up my Kentucky Wildcats. I am a
we can get you a big Kentucky Wildcat background.
There you go. If that eliminates me, if I've got some Duke fans out there, I've got very good friends that are Duke fans. It's all good. But again, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the counselors and to everybody else. So thanks again.
Thanks for your time, Mike.